It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders, of course. Alan, how are we doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Sick of shoveling the sidewalk. I don't mind the snow. I just wish it would all come at once. Like just fall already. Be done with it.
I thought you were going to say you're fine. Just don't stick at all. Just like you just.
No, I'm cool. I think I was actually just saying. I was driving through the neighborhood the other day, taking my daughter to dance class, and I was like, everything looks very pretty under the snow, except for like shopping centers, which look like dingy gray piles of I don't know what. But yeah, No, I don't mind the snow. Just ready to stop shoveling.
I guess I'm gonna have to get used to doing this on my own as well. Don't know if you saw my tweet. Don't know if everybody watched or listened to this saw my tweet. I got an offer accepted on a house. So your boy finally,
congratulations,
after a long hunt, finally. Obviously, I have to still go through the inspection, the process here, but very hopeful that now the hunt is over after 3-ish months of being on the hunt. So yeah, appreciate everybody that's been keeping. I actually had I've gone through the YouTube comments a couple times and seen people asking about it. I've got a couple DMs about it for people that watch. So appreciate that, everybody that's been staying in tune with that. But Alan, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about football. As always, what we want to start with, kind of go through the injury report. First and foremost, it doesn't look good for MyCole Pruitt this week. I would say going from a limited to a DNP. Maybe this is the way, like we talked about what that could mean for like helmet math. Is this a way to have one less tight end if they wanted to, get Roman Wilson into the game? Like that's potentially a way to do it. What do you make of this? I think that you're in agreement with no MyCole Pruitt, but what could the fallout of that be?
Yeah, I mean, Matt Sokol's on the practice squad. I guess if they really feel like they need 4 tight ends, that would be the answer. I think I would sooner give a helmet to somebody like Roman Wilson. But I don't know. There's they'd have to clear a 53-man spot in addition to having a helmet for game days. So where does that come from and how do they make that work? It all gets very complicated this time of year. How injured is MyCole Pruitt? I don't know. Is this something where if he had to miss this game, but he would definitely be able to play next week, does that factor into the decision at all? I think it would be very helpful to get a guy like Roman Wilson, even if it's like 20 snaps, even if it's like 10 snaps. I think it would be very helpful to get him in a game here before the end of his rookie year, but I don't know if that's in the cards or not. We shall see.
Other ones that we mentioned, Donte Jackson, where he's going to be monitoring throughout the week, practicing in full. Mason McCormick with the brace thing on his hand. Also, I feel like we should just talk about the fact that they practiced at Acrisure Stadium to get used to the environment and the elements that are going to be at play. You mentioned the snow. Certainly looks like that's going to be part of the factors that they're going to play with on Saturday.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't know. It's still pretty far out for like a real snow forecast in terms of like what it might be like during the game. But it's certainly going to be cold. The Steelers try to practice indoors when they have conditions like this, so they don't tear up their grass on the south side. But with it being very unlikely that they're going to host a game at Acrisure, they've got a whole nother field they can tear up. So they practiced over there.
There you go. And speaking of it being cold, some players been under the weather as of late. I don't know if there's something going around in the locker room or what. There's probably more guys that are feeling a little bit sick than the guys that have missed practice with it. Both Heywards I know have been sick. Cam missing practice the last 2 days due to an illness.
And
then
Connor
Boswell
after the game that he was, kind of going through it as well. And then Boswell, man, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know how sick you have to be to not be able to kick. Obviously, the Steelers don't have a backup, so like I guess you hope it's nothing too debilitating. But I wouldn't.
Well,
be concerned about Boswell at this point.
Yeah, I'm not either. But I'm just thinking, like, with Harrison Butker back in the mix in KC, did they get rid of Matthew Wright? I'm assuming
Matthew Wright finished the regular season on the Titans practice squad.
Oh.
So those contracts generally expire after your season ends, but I'm not sure exactly when. Of course, the Steelers could always sign him off the practice squad to the 53 if they didn't want to add him to the practice squad.
It's like the SpongeBob meme. You open up the old reliable thing, and it's Matthew.
Yeah.
When you
what's funny is that he's old reliable for like both the Steelers and the Chiefs. I think he's had 3 stints with both teams. He's like Harrison Butker and Chris Boswell's personal backup.
He's their stunt dummy, basically. But yeah, I mean,
Broadway, the understudy.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably a better than throwing the word dummy out there. Of course, don't mean dummy in that sense, but yeah. Anyway, I guess it's something to monitor throughout. Like, are more guys going to end up catching whatever's going on in that locker room? I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid.
Yeah, locker rooms are difficult to sanitize places. That's for sure. So, yeah, I mean, we've seen it happen before, especially if it is the flu, which is fairly contagious. I know Cam said he has the flu, but sometimes people use that kind of figuratively or
Yeah.
literally. But yeah, we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for some guys with the sniffles here over the next couple days.
Also something that took place today, as always, coordinators talking, because with playing on a Saturday, which like I don't know, I guess we should just gotten used to this weird schedule that we've had down the stretch where days are all kind of thrown off. But basically today would have acted as like a regular season Thursday, with them playing on Saturday. So coordinators talking today. Anything to really take away from those? I know the one thing that you mentioned to me was like Arthur Smith talking about, obviously it's out there that there's some interest in head coaching vacancies to at least get a look. But anything within that or beyond that said by either of the coordinators?
Yeah, I mean, I think Arthur Smith has been pretty upfront about the opportunities he's gotten. First when he um, was offered the opportunity at Carolina, his alma mater, and he kind of
Mhm.
turned that down. And then this time, being requested to interview for the Jets and the Bears. I'm not sure. He didn't really confirm or deny whether he's going to take those interviews. They obviously can't take place until after the Steelers season ends anyway. But he said, like, you don't know how many chances like this you're going to get. You can't be worried about the next job when you're doing this one. And so I think that's pretty evident that he's a been there, done that guy. It's not like he's going to be giddy and distracted by an interview with
Mhm.
Woody Johnson. Like he understands the way this all works, and so I wasn't concerned, but I guess he did set aside to anyone who may have been concerned that Arthur Smith is focused on anything other than being the Steelers offense coordinator right now, that he is not.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either, but I can just appreciate him kind of reaffirming that, the idea of being where your feet are, and being present in the moment. I think that that's obviously what they need to have take place, in
And
this one. Go
Smitty,
ahead.
I want to bring this up because we just said yesterday
Mhm.
about how Arthur Smith, he coaches what he coaches. I was talking and I said, if you wanted to run the wishbone, you would not hire Arthur Smith to run the wishbone. Today, in his press conference, Arthur Smith asked if leaving no stone unturned, which was something he had said in response to another question, I believe a question about playing Justin Fields more, were drastic things on the table. And his response, yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm going to put in the wishbone.
There it is. Hey,
Just saying,
whoever's out there, whoever's working for the Steelers that watch or listens to this, we appreciate it, and it's
putting these
putting it in their ear.
words and keep putting things into action. If the Steelers run a wishbone play this week, you know where it came from.
What else got brought up, Alan, to Arthur Smith was something regarding Russell Wilson and George Pickens. He was asked about as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I kind of asked about them not being on the same page, and he said it's communication, which I think is an interesting answer. Right? I mean, I, I think like that's a difficult thing to have as a problem still when you're in the playoffs, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know why, and he said like there's a play where Mike Hilton moves and then they make a check and then somebody doesn't get the check right. And he says, that's communication. I put it back on myself. Okay, we rep this 5 times on practice. And he says, I can blame the player. We can say, all right, why is there lack of execution at those critical moments? But he said, but at the core of the idea is that somehow, some way, a message is not being given and received the way it's supposed to. I think communication gets overblamed for a lot of things, man. Like, I get
Yeah,
it. Like,
that's what I was just saying.
yeah, at the core, like, yes, everything needs to be communicated, but like, man, I don't know. I don't know how much I buy into that, but I do think this. I mean, we talked yesterday about the Steelers having to get Russell and George going, and it's been an issue the last 2 games. There's no question. I
I
I don't know if I buy communication being the
Well, I was just asked what you would chalk up to, last drive, the one where he like overshoots George, if that's what you want it. Like George stops running basically to turn around and does like a twirl in the air trying to go up and get it. What you would attribute that one to? I guess it's kind of hard to say without talking to both players about it, but
yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to speculate, but like I would. There's no communicating there. Like that's kind of, you have to be able to read each other's minds a little bit, right? And so I think that's kind of what's. I mean, wasn't that a scramble drill play too, where like Russ had kind of run around a little bit and reset his feet. He didn't just set and throw that, did he?
oh geez, I don't know, to be honest.
I
can't even picture what happened before the
throw.
throw.
I think that was a bit of an ad lib there, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to have touch and feel. I thought that was the thing that Russ really showed to be a strength of his when we first got a good look at him, was that he seemed to have a better touch and feel for like what guys were going to do and where guys were going to go. I'm not quite sure why some of those things seem to have fallen by the wayside here in the end of the season.
I feel like there's a lot of things that you could say that about in terms of going by the wayside and trending in the wrong direction. That's kind of where I want to go with this. I got asked a question on Twitter, but we're going to be able to tie this back to a lot of different things. This question comes from, I don't know if they're going for something else here with the name. I'm going to read it, and I don't know if this is supposed to be inappropriate because it could be taken that way. And their name is Spanky Banky. So I don't know if they're going for something else there or what, but I appreciate
some of the guy's last name's Banks. That's
yep,
what I'm going with, and
that's
my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yep, absolutely. He said, "What do you think is the best way for the Steelers to try to mitigate their bad offensive line? Thought that they were doing a better job of staying out of true pass sets early on in the season. Is it just a matter of going from Justin to Russ that has made all the difference, or what are you seeing when you watch them right now?"
I don't know. This is an interesting question because I think the answer has not been the same every week. Like I thought they had been running the ball better. I thought they ran the ball better against Baltimore and Kansas City. And so when we get into discussion about Mike Tomlin and the game plan shift, I think there's a part of it where you can say like, hey, this actually, like there's some reasons why this might have made sense. And they did. They ran the ball better in week 16 and week 17, but they got behind and they kind of had to abandon the run even though it had been working for them. And then last week against just a bad defense, no other way to say it, bad defense, they couldn't run the ball at all. And so when your offensive line is inconsistent, I think it becomes very difficult to deal with, right? And there's a number of ways they're inconsistent. I think they've very consistently been better at run blocking than pass protection. I think that's been the same story all year. But other than that, like I think there have been stretches where Zach Frazier kind of looks like a Pro Bowl player to me. And there's been stretches where he looks like a second-round rookie. And it's hard to blame him for that. That's what second-round rookies do. I thought Dan Moore was good in the early part of the season and has really tailed off the last couple of weeks. Yes, difficult assignments, but I thought Trey Hendrickson really had his way with him. And Broderick Jones, I think you can put on the other end of that spectrum. I thought he's been so much better the last few weeks than he started the season. But I think inconsistency is a really hard thing to coach your way out of because whatever you think you might need to do might not be what you need to do, depending on the way that inconsistency manifests itself in that particular game.
Yeah, it is really interesting with the tackles because it's been a tale of two seasons for both of them and in opposite directions. Not to say that I wish Dan was struggling early, but I kind of wish they were at least going in the same direction, right? Like if he was going to struggle, you would have hoped that it would be early on in the season. For him on his own level, right, too. I mean, he's going to be a pending free agent. Like we never have thought that his future beyond this year was with Pittsburgh anyway, but is he impacting his own free agent market in the process? 10 sacks given up since the bye week, which is pretty crazy to think about. And I know that the sacks don't tell the entire story, but like you're saying, understanding the matchups that he's had, it hasn't been good for him. And then you look at the interior, Isaac Seumalo is an interesting case even, man. Like he can look like he's their best offensive lineman, but then he'll have like 2-3 games where it's just duds. Like, and for a player of his caliber that's been there and done that, it's been a bit surprising for me to see that take place this season. And maybe it's a product of making up for playing next to Dan Moore, who struggled this year, and playing next to a rookie in Zach Frazier, who's had some struggles this year as well. But I don't know. Yeah, it just seems like you're saying, I think inconsistent is probably the best word to put to it, because I don't know that they've been bad, straight the whole way through. I just think that there's been no week to week consistency in terms of what you're going to get. It's kind of like until they get rolling in a game, you don't know which version you're getting.
Yeah, I think you have to be agile. You have to be more adaptable than what the Steelers have been to what's happening on the field. Like, I think that was the big problem against Cincinnati. It wasn't that the idea coming into the game that, hey, we've been running the ball pretty well, so while this game is 0-0, like, let's see if we can establish this into something and not let the game get out of hand. Like, I think that thought process is probably valid, but then you get down and the run's not working, and I thought they just needed to find a way to be a little bit more nimble and adjust more quickly than they did. But even against the Ravens in the exact same matchup, the first game, the Steelers couldn't run the ball at all, 3.6 yards per carry. Second game, they ran 4.9. Like so like it's been very inconsistent. But I think the one area that I think there should be some concern, 7 sacks of Russell Wilson over the 2 games against the Ravens. The Ravens finished second in the NFL in sacks, just behind the Denver Broncos. And it seems like this trend down the stretch has been that the offensive line gets beat, Russ hasn't been dealing with the pressure as well, and things start to pile up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, by the way, is that surprising to you that the Baltimore Ravens are second in the league in sacks when you look at the personnel?
Who's their best pass rusher? Like 30,
probably
Kyle
Van
Noy. I don't actually know how old he is. That's a guess. 33-year-old Kyle Van Noy, like that. I mean, yeah, he was a highly drafted guy 10 years ago. Like that's very surprising to me. How successful they've been in rushing the passer, considering their personnel, which I don't think is particularly elite.
Yeah, Justin Madubuike was, all pro last year, got his big contract, still 6.5 this year from the interior. That's a good number and everything like that. But he was better last year. So to see 12.5 from Van Noy, 10 from Owe, and then beyond that, it's just kind of like spreading the wealth. They just have guys that have chipped in here and there along that. But you mentioned an interesting thing to me in terms of who they brought in to help kind of develop these pass rushers.
Yeah, so I think if you want to talk about the Baltimore Ravens pass rush, I think you can start with the conversation we had yesterday about the Steelers and investing in coaching and how they don't have a big staff, about how we feel like they've missed some opportunities. And Chuck Smith is the Ravens, I guess they call him like a pass rush coach or outside linebackers coach or something like that. This is in his second year. He only coaches the pass rushers. That's all he does. Chuck Smith, of course, was a defensive end for the Atlanta Falcons for a long time and worked in some media, but also after his playing career got into like one-on-one coaching. And Chuck Smith was like Cam Heyward's, among other people, but Cam Heyward from the Atlanta area or grew up partially in the Atlanta area, had a relationship with him, and they worked together. And the Ravens hired Chuck Smith on their coaching staff 2 years ago. And I'm not really surprised that they made that investment in a coach specifically for that skill. And now they're one of the best in the league at it, despite not having elite talent. Like, it kind of tracks.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's about what we talked about yesterday, like bringing in guys that even if they have like just a singular focus, like one thing that they are just do really well and bring to the table, that's worth it. Clearly that move has been worth the investment to them with what they've gotten from that group. So, yeah, I would like to obviously see the Steelers kind of do some similar things. Not specifically, I don't know that they need like a pass rush specialist coach or anything like that, but just like the idea, right? Like I'm not against that either, but just the idea of having people around that are just really good at one thing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely you look at the Ravens coaching staff and it's just full of guys that bring stuff to the table. Like when they add, someone like this, like a secondary position coach, right? Like, outside linebackers coach or whatever. Like they're not hiring like some like 32-year-old from a FCS school, like to give some, you know what I mean? Like they're hiring like a legitimate coach with legitimate NFL knowledge to fill that role. So like look at the Ravens like defensive staff, and it's full of these guys. And they bring in Dean Pease in the middle of the year, like Zach Orr, a first year defensive coordinator. They didn't think things were going well enough. They bring in Dean Pease in the middle of the season. Like Steelers don't have anybody like that. Like I think that is definitely a bit of a blind spot of this coaching staff.
Yeah. You look around, you just see that can consistently happen where teams are just finding the weaknesses with it. Like they obviously still like Zach Orr, right? But like understanding maybe where his weaknesses might be and giving him a supporting cast to kind of fall back on. So I'm all for it. And I think that needs to be implemented within this culture as well. Oh, one more thing as it relates to the offensive line, because I don't know if we touched about it a ton. Part of that question was about the quarterback switch as well that took place from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson. Yes. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, Justin's better running away. There's no question about that. I think, Russ needs to get rid of the ball. I mean, him holding on to the ball has always been a thing. I felt like he did better when he first got into the lineup. When we first saw Russell Wilson compared to Justin Fields, I thought it was really eye-opening how much faster the ball was coming out. And I thought that made a huge difference in the results for him compared to what we'd been seeing for Justin Fields. I thought it was a big reason why Russell Wilson was a lot better than Justin Fields. And now I feel like he's holding the ball again. Like I feel like in some ways, like he's reverted to some old bad habits that seem to be cropping up in terms of holding on to the ball too long. And he just doesn't have the wheels to like run around and make plays anymore. Like he hasn't had. Has there been one play where Russ like seriously extended the play? Like I'm talking like 4 or 5 seconds and then made like a big play downfield. Like I haven't seen that once. Like, the old Big Ben backyard football kind of deal. Like I haven't seen any of that. Like it just, that doesn't seem to be an option for him, but he continues to hold on to the ball. Like you got really good combat catch guys and George Pickens and Mike Williams. If they're not open, sometimes you just got to cut it loose. Like the play on the last drive against the Bengals where he runs like that's just a big mistake. Like I don't know what's happening there, but that shouldn't be happening.
Oh, you're saying the very last drive where
where they run. I don't know how many, at least 10, 12 seconds off the clock because he gets tackled in bounds for a 3-yard gain. Like just give one of your guys a chance to make a play.
On first down, by the way, even if he was going to throw it away or something.
Yeah, throw it away. And also like how much does this go back to being turnover averse? Like Mike Tomlin's been harping on the turnovers, and now like how much does that go into a guy holding on to the ball too long? I don't know, but it hasn't been going smoothly. That's for sure. I think they've got to find to me, the kill 3 birds with 1 stone answer is call some slants to George Pickens, because then like you're getting him involved. You're giving Russ throws he's got to make fast, and it protects the offensive line. Like what did Joe Burrow, who is 20, I don't know, 6, something like that. Probably, certainly in his athletic prime, even if he's been banged up a little bit. If the Bengals are going, you got to throw the ball, Joe, in 2.2 seconds, or the Steelers' defensive line is going to eat you. Like, why isn't that okay for the Steelers to do? Like, it should be. Like, if that's an adjustment the Bengals can make to beat the Steelers' defense, that's an adjustment the Steelers' offense can make, and we haven't seen them do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, full agreement here. But one more thing that I want to get to, actually, you brought this up, and I think this is an interesting conversation because I think the answer could be different depending on exactly what part of this that you're talking about. You asked me, and this is something that you touched on a little bit at the end of your morning rush today, that if the Steelers were to win this game in Baltimore, does that all of a sudden mean that everything is okay in Steelers land? Does that heal everything that's happened? Would that completely sew up these wounds that have been created within the last 4 weeks? And I think that's an interesting question to pose, not only to myself, but I'm very curious as what the answer to everybody watching or listening to this would be. I want to get your take on that before I give mine.
I think my take on it is, like, for me, I don't really think it means that much. just me personally, the way I'm going to evaluate the coaches on this team, the level of talent on this team, where it is, where it's going, where it should be. I don't think one singular playoff win changes a lot for me. Probably not. That would be my sort of gut feeling answer, is that I know the Steelers are capable of beating the Baltimore Ravens. I've seen them do it this year. They've also been a really good matchup for the Ravens over the years. I won't be particularly surprised if they win. And I think it doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know about this team, where it is, or what it's capable of. Beating Baltimore or Kansas City, even if it was just in this first game, just in the wild card round, even if they advance no further. But I think beating Baltimore or Kansas City on the road in this situation might tell me something I don't already know about this team. I'm not sure that beating Baltimore in this circumstance does. I'm sure that if they had gone to Houston and won in this circumstance, it would definitely not tell me anything about winning one game. What are your thoughts?
So the reason that I wanted to ask you first is because I know that, you typically view things more as like, process over one result. Like the result could be it's one game, right? But like specifically when it is a playoff game, win or go home, I wonder how much, if at all, that idea shifts for you. That's why I wanted to get your opinion.
Not really at all. Like, I mean, I think sometimes like we forget that like football's a weird sport and dumb things happen, and any given Sunday is a saying for a reason. Like especially depends on how the game plays out. I mean, if they just go out here and just like whip them, okay, maybe like maybe you'll have me convinced that I'm not spot on all these things. But like if the Steelers go out here and like block a punt and Boz kicks 6 field goals and they win, like 18-12 again. Like I don't know. I don't know that I'm not sure that's telling me much that I don't already know.
Yeah, I get my concern, and I say concern, which is not something that I would have thought like a month ago, is that they show enough offensively where all of a sudden they switch a lot of the minds in terms of they should go forward with Russell Wilson, because my mind has kind of been made up on that, where I wouldn't sign up for the idea of doing so beyond like when you are the age that he is and the season has trended in the wrong direction. I think that's the most damning part about it. Like I'm just worried about, is he, I don't know if breaking down is the right word. It's just, I'm worried about this trend continuing if they sign up for a longer period of time for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think specifically when you're talking about Russell Wilson, like I think he's really playing for a lot of money here. I don't know whether it's with the Steelers or with someone else. Like I think how much he is worth to anyone out there really depends on not just the reason. See, and that's why I think it works for him, because it's not just about this game. It's about reversing the trend of 4 straight losses at the end of the year, even after not even playing a whole year. Is he wearing down? Have defenses figured him and Arthur Smith out, and they can't? They don't have an answer, right? They were one-trick ponies. Defenses figured out the one trick. Now they're screwed. Like, I think it goes a long way to add a different data point to the end of this season for Russell Wilson than the last 4 we've seen. I don't really think it does that much for me with the team. Like, I kind of feel like the team is what it is. They belong in this game. They shouldn't be favored in this game. They still might win it. Like, I feel like the team we have enough knowledge about. And I think for so many people, the not winning a playoff thing is so emotional now. Like, I don't, like, does it tell us anything? I mean, I think the premise of my show today was that if they win this game, you have to acknowledge that was a good coaching job by Mike Tomlin in a playoff game, which people have been harping on forever and ever. And I think you do have to acknowledge that they're now in some places 10-point underdogs. Like if you win that game, that is a really good coaching job. But I don't think one really good coaching job in the playoffs should be telling us anything about Mike Tomlin new. Like
Okay.
we should
Well,
know
that's what I
he's
was going to ask
capable of that.
you. I was going to ask you how you felt about that, because that's the other one, right? Like, we're mentioning Russell coming into this game and the concern with him because of the way he's looked on a 4-game losing streak and that trend. Well, it's been a longer trend. It's been longer than 4 games straight that the Steelers have lost in the playoffs. So I was wondering about your thoughts on the potential narrative shift. Well, you just answered that. You feel like it shouldn't take place regardless of
Yeah.
if
I
they
mean,
win.
so
But if they lose this game and it continues to go on, what would happen? Especially if like the defense has another playoff stinker where they give up, 35 plus points or something like that, whatever, because they've really struggled obviously in that aspect, specifically in the playoffs as of late.
yeah, so that's sort of it for me. I mean, like these 4 games happen in a row. This will be the 5th
Mhm.
game in a row. I think if you do something 5 games in a row, that's a trend. I think if you do 5 things in 1 game each over an 8-year sample, to me that's not a trend. That's just something that happened. I don't the game doesn't change in the playoffs. Like the things that you need to do to win playoff games are not any different than the things that you need to do to win regular season games. Um, I think it's really fraught to attempt to link playoff performances under Mike Tomlin together. Like there's some lesson to be learned from those data points. I don't think there's any meaning behind any of it. Like, there's over those 8 seasons, there's 100 and some, 135 some games,
Mhm.
whatever it is, over the, that sample means a lot more to me than the 5 playoff losses in a row or whatever it is. Like, I don't think there's any connection between those games.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to, I don't want this to happen, but what the conversation could escalate to again. I mean, I'm not I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of that, but the randomness of it, I understand that. At the same time, like the performance, specifically the defense, is what I want to focus in on here. When you look at Jaguars back in 2017-18 season, 45 points. Cleveland doing what they did in 2020. Obviously, Kansas City and Buffalo, 2 really good teams that they didn't expect them to be in those ones. But when you look specifically at the defensive performances within that, is that something to you that you're just like, that aspect at the very least can't continue? Or like, what is is it just coincidence that they've had such bad performances specifically in this one game, or what? Like, where are we at with
Yeah,
those?
I mean, I basically, coincidence, and they turned the ball over a lot in those games too. I mean, like, yeah,
They
I mean,
did.
Steelers had 5 turnovers against the Browns in 2020.
At least 3 against the Jaguars.
And we're obviously pressing late in that game, so like whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, and 2 or 3 against Jacksonville. I mean, look, the Jacksonville team, who was the starting linebacker? Spence? Like,
Sean Spence, and yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, I see. That's why I don't think, like, no, I can't draw a thread from that game to Saturday in almost any way. I don't see it. I don't think there's any connection or any way to reasonably bring them together with any kind of meaning. Maybe last year, but like, I mean, I thought the Steelers defense played reasonably well last year, despite not having TJ Watt. Thought the defense played really well in Kansas City for a while, even if the final score doesn't really necessarily look like it did. I mean, they were single-handedly keeping them in that game for a very long time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know how much more you want from them in that game.
Yeah, they gave the offense. They tried to keep Kansas City at bay long enough for the offense to find their pulse, and just never happened. TJ scoring a touchdown, obviously 7-0. They get another interception. Kansas City ends up finding their footing, obviously, and ends up looking like a blowout. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see how the conversation shifts based off what happened Saturday, because it's going to, in my opinion, drastically one way or another, regardless of if it should. I think that we're both in agreement that it shouldn't drastically change narratives about this team, but it's going to. Like, I think that at least from where I stand, I'm fully expecting Saturday to completely alter how people view what happen this season one way or another.
Okay.
That's my take. Not how I feel. I'm
Yeah.
expecting that 100% from the fan base as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are pretty down right now already. I'm not sure that a loss is going to change that too much for a lot of people. I am curious as to how much a win would change things and how much what happens the following, like, does what happens the following week then matter, right? Like, let's say the Steelers do exactly what I said and like muck up a crappy win, and then they just go get destroyed next week in Kansas City. Like, does that is that a very brief respite on the same feelings coming around? I mean, look, I don't think either of us are picking the Steelers to win the Super Bowl. At some point, we're expecting them to lose. Do all of those bad feelings come around eventually at some point anyway? Or does getting a win, or is there a level of play that allows people to say, you know what, that was actually good enough?
Man, that's tough. But okay, so like preseason, my thought on this team was they'll be a wild card, losing the first round. You thought they were actually more equipped to win a playoff game.
I thought
year.
they would be in the wild card and win in the first round. So
okay, yeah. So if they were to win this game, and then despite what happens the next round, I would have to say that they overachieved regardless. I guess winning 10 games when they were 8.5, I believe was the number. I mean, I don't know. I would certainly say that they
fair to say that this team, they didn't really come out and say it, but I think it's fair in their moves to say, like, they tried really hard to win a playoff game this year. Like, you don't sign Russell Wilson at 34 years old because you're playing for the future, right? Like they made a bunch of win now moves. And I think it's fair to say those win now moves were unsuccessful if they can't even win one playoff.
What's odd about that?
They overachieved in the regular season.
What's odd about that, though, to me is if Russell Wilson, you go out and get Russell Wilson for this year, specifically saying this is the year that we're going to win a playoff game and this drought. Yet, I understand that they tried within the receiver market to a degree, but they certainly didn't do everything that they could have done to give him the best supporting cast within this offense too. It just, I think it was a mistake.
I think they misread where the receiver market was going, and I think even by August they had realized that they should have done that differently.
Is it did they have the lowest cash spending this year on offense? It was certainly in the bottom 3.
Yeah, I think that's I think they're like third from last.
Okay.
Because they do spend it. They have the highest paid defense, but they do spend a good bit on Chris Boswell. So like they have slightly elevated special team spending. I think brings them up out of the bottom on offense.
Okay. All right. Well,
and that money on Bos has been worth every penny this year.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let us know how you guys feel about how Saturday's game could shift the narrative in one direction or another. If you don't feel like it should, let us know in the comments for sure. Alan, until tomorrow, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on social media, SteelersNow.com, and PGH Steelers Now site's account. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel, and pushing forward into the postseason here.
There you go. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you are listening somewhere else as well. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You will find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing over on TikTok. Then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.